My name's Colonel David Crockett. Some folks call me the Tennessean, and some say I'm the reason that Tennessee's called the volunteer state. Now, old Andy Jackson, now he liked to call me some things that ain't worth repeating. But my ma and my pa, John and Rebecca Crockett, now they like calling me David, not Davy, and that's what I like being called, is David Crockett. Now, it seems here today that folks have gathered in this little town of Rutherford, Tennessee to pay homage to my memory. See, this was my last home before I went to the Alamo. This is where I kissed the missus goodbye, Miss Elizabeth. Kissed her goodbye, and I rode off from here and rode down toward Memphis and wound up West Memphis, Arkansas, and cut my trail across Arkansas into the panhandle of Texas. And wound up in Nacogdoches, and from there I wound up at a little old Spanish mission called the Alamo. And that's where we ran into one of them fellers called Santa Annie, and that's where I met my demise.
This is Rutherford, and we're enjoying Davy Crockett Days, a parade and festival that began in 1968.
It's a big homecoming, as you might imagine. We see a lot of people here that we haven't seen in a year, so it's a real fun time, and we have introduced some history to it and some music. Most people think about the parade, but we've got a lot else going on, as you've seen today.
We've got 9 beagle puppies, and we've got 3, 4, how many coonhound puppies, and they're purebred. They use them to hunt raccoons at night, basically. In the mountains of East Tennessee, I think they use them to chase boar with. The original fathers come from England, and it's called the walkers. Over in England, I think they use them to hunt foxes and maybe badgers.
Throughout this week in October, there are gatherings, programs, music, games, and a dog show at the school that always draws a good number of local participants. And as always, good food.
I like to barbecue. I'm one of those Memphis and May certified judges. So if I cook bad barbecue, it's my own fault, because I know what to expect when it comes to barbecuing.
But the center of the celebration is the Crockett Cabin. Originally located east of town, the cabin was moved to its current spot for preservation. This was the home of Davy's mother, Rebecca Crockett. Her gravestone stands just a few feet south of the cabin. Davy lived in this area for 14 years, his last home in Tennessee.
He came here from Lawrence County after the floods washed away his mills on Shoal Creek. And I understand they still have some big floods down there. But his wife, his father-in-law, his wife's father had a 1,000-acre land grant here for services rendered in the Revolution. And they came here to start over again. And he supposedly killed 105 bear one winter after they started carrying off his nearest neighbor, who lived about 7 miles away, carrying off his pigs, Mr. McDaniel. So Davy, that's all the excuse he needed to start hunting bear.
In the early 1800s, northwest Tennessee was one of the most densely forested areas, and it was said that a man couldn't survive for the bears. Legend reports that Davy killed 105.
But he did kill a lot of bears down in the Obion River bottom, but I don't think he killed one when he was 3 years old. He was putting meat on their family's table when he was 8 years old. Turkeys and bears and all kind of wild animals.
Inside the cabin there is a wealth of artifacts, some related to Davy Crockett and others to the era and heritage. Fess Parker donated his coonskin cap to the collection. Of particular note are letters written by Davy and a march composed in his honor. Taming and living in the frontier was no easy task, and for the time the Crockett Cabin appears quite comfortable.
Davy actually helped to lay out the trail between Trenton and Troy, which was a part of the Hickman to Jackson Road. Hickman was our river port back then. And both of my great-granddaddies, for a few years, kept a post office on the old Hickman to Jackson Road, and the stagecoaches stopped by there. And that was before the railroad. The railroad came a little east of that route, and the old settlement was Pond Hill, and then they had Rutherford Station.
Davy opposed many of Andrew Jackson's political views, and his campaign for Congress took him to Memphis. Losing the election, Davy was drawn by the promise of land in the Red River area of Texas. He and his Tennessee volunteers joined the struggle for Texas independence.
He got on the wrong side of the Jackson people. He opposed the Indian removal bill. He didn't like Jackson's banking bill arrangements, and so he lost the close race and decided that he would go to Texas.
Over the years, history, heritage, and education have gained more focus at the festival. Wayne Morris picks up the story of Davy Crockett in Texas. With his detailed diorama, he wants folks to remember the Alamo.
I've been interested in Davy Crockett and the Alamo ever since I was about 10 years old. And I found out in the year 2000 that not many kids know history. And I asked one kid, high school graduate, what does December 7th, 1941 mean to you? I don't know. Doesn't mean nothing, you know. I said, well, what about the Alamo? Never heard of it. I said, I can take this little piece of history right here and put it on the ground and show people. I've been working on this for about 6 years, but it's a never-ending process. And this is not all of it. I don't have my artillery pieces put up. I have San Antonio to go out there. They're little cardboard boxes, but it'll give you the general idea of what the battlefield looked like.
Well, it pretty much started about 6-7 years ago. My daughter come home with 5th grade history, and we sat down and we looked at what she was being taught in American history, and I was quite appalled that it had been so abbreviated and revised. So from that I thought, well, I'll take my aspirations as an entertainer and take that and combine it into something that would actually entertain the children, because American history today is just names and dates. The day they lived, the day they died, and you try to remember their names, and the significance of their lives are forgotten.
Even the fanciful tales of Rutherford's name are examined.
Folklorists have run into this where people said that David gave it its name because he came to the river and somebody wanted a quarter to ferry across, and he said, no, I'd rather ford it. That's not true. Henry Rutherford was an early surveyor, and he discovered the fork of the Obion River that was south of the South Fork, so that became Rutherford's Fork. When the railroad came through here, they needed a station nearby, so that became Rutherford Station.
For me, all of the history adds to the fun of a festival steeped in the traditions of hearth and home.
As you know, we had a really disastrous tornado that passed through here in April, and this is a special celebration for us because the rebuilding has begun. The park has a long way to go, but the Woodman of the World building has been rebuilt. The Rescue Squad building has been rebuilt. The Mennonite neighbors that we have were very helpful on those things, and they even helped with an auction last night up at the fire department. So this community is building back and probably will be closer than they were before.
I just want folks to know I certainly do appreciate the celebration in my honor here. It's quite the honor. It's amazing, every year they gather, and Mr. Old Joe Bone, he'll stand up there and he'll play his music. And if you ever want to know something about David Crockett, come visit Old Joe Bone down here at the Crockett Cabin in Rutherford, Tennessee. And my mama's grave, it's here also. Matter of fact, the logs out of this home, that was out of my mama's cabin. A lot of history here. You know, it's up to me and you to preserve Americans' history. If we don't, it'll be gone someday, and future generations, they won't know nothing about David Crockett. They won't know nothing about George Washington or any of our founding fathers. So it's important to take time to remember those who have fallen and gone before us.